A giant ram engulfed in flames suddenly appeared at the edge of the forest. While everyone stared in shock at the scene, a large number of animals emerged from the forest. The students on the school bus found this scene quite astonishing. Curious, Austin tried to take out his phone to capture everything, but Blake grabbed the phone and threw it out the window. Austin, furious, wanted to go outside to retrieve his phone, but as soon as he stepped outside, the animals from the forest started charging towards them. The other students on the bus were terrified when they saw this and fled from the bus, trying to escape the scene. One student named Everett had been hiding on the bus to stay safe. However, the forest fire had spread rapidly, forcing Everett to leave. As soon as Everett got off the bus, Austin rushed over to warn him to get back inside.
There's something up! Austin!
Everett was petrified and wanted to leave as quickly as possible, but now the animals seemed to have gone mad and started attacking humans. Everett even saw some unusual creatures in the thick smoke, which frightened him so much that he collapsed to the ground due to his anxiety disorder. At this moment, an out-of-control vehicle headed straight towards Everett. Fortunately, Blake was alert and managed to save him just in time. However, in that brief moment, Everett's shoulder had already sustained a significant injury. Blake kept urging him to run, but just as Blake got up, Everett noticed that something seemed to have bitten her around her waist. Despite this, Everett couldn't worry about anything else and chose to run. After reaching the other side of the forest, Everett realized that all of this was caused by the forest fire here. Blake was somewhat of a primitive person, as she didn't have a phone, an email, or any electronic devices. The only way to contact Everett was to find her in person. Blake then returned home, but since her home was in the disaster area, her father Roberto was planning to take her and her brother Danny to safety. While packing at home, Blake noticed the injury on her waist. Oddly enough, even though there was a sizable wound on her waist, Blake didn't feel any pain. Seeing that the wound wasn't bleeding and didn't hurt, Blake didn't pay much attention and continued packing her belongings. However, Blake didn't know that this wound would change her life forever. Meanwhile, Everett had been taken back to the hospital by the rescue team. When Everett woke up, he suddenly felt something unusual on the bed next to him. Curious, he pulled back the curtain to see what was going on. To his surprise, he found a giant ram lying on the bed beside him. Just as Everett was feeling bewildered, a doctor appeared and interrupted his hallucination. The doctor told Everett that his wound was not serious and that he only needed a few days of rest before he could be discharged. But as soon as the doctor left, the phone next to Everett's bed rang. Seeing that no one came to pay attention, he simply went up to pick up the phone himself.
Hello?
Get out of the hospital.
Who is this?
Leave the hospital now. Grab your things and go.
What? Why?
It's going to find you. It can't move as easily in daylight. You are bitten. It has to find you before the next full moon.
What does it want?
To kill you. Before the full moon.
Everett panicked when he heard this. At this moment, his parents also arrived at the hospital to see him, but at the same time, Everett suddenly felt a sharp pain in his wound, and then his arms seemed to emit a strange red glow, causing him to faint in the next second. On the other side, Blake's father had already set off in the car. For some unknown reason, Blake, who had never experienced car sickness, suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. Then she also seemed to have hallucinations. Shortly after, the family of 3 arrived at a motel to stay temporarily, but just as they settled down, Danny pointed out that Blake's skin was changing. Feeling astonished, Blake immediately went to the mirror to see what was happening. To her surprise, she found that her previously acne-scarred face had become incredibly smooth. As Blake wondered if she was seeing things, a sharp pain from the wound on her waist interrupted her observation. Blake fell to the ground in pain. However, the pain didn't last long. When Blake stood up again, the mirror had astonishingly turned into a TV screen. On the screen was Everett, the boy she had saved. At the same time, Everett in the mirror turned his head and seemed to see Blake. Realizing something was wrong with herself, Blake decided not to rest in the motel but to go out and find out what was happening to her body. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a girl named Luna hurried into a bar, looking for her twin brother, Harlan. Luna was there to find her brother because of the forest fire. Their father, Garrett, was a forest ranger for that forest, and he had gone missing after the fire started. Luna believed their father might be trapped in the forest by the fire. She wanted to find her brother to help her search for their father because they had some extraordinary abilities.
They found his truck.
But not him.
Following the instructions from the phone call, Everett quietly sneaked out of the hospital when the doctor left. Meanwhile, Blake also decided to return home to find out what was going on, but as she ran, she didn't notice that her speed had surpassed Usain Bolt's and that she was even more enduring than him. Blake soon returned home. To her surprise, she encountered Everett there. It turned out that Everett had come looking for Blake because he saw her. Since Blake had no contact information, Everett had to find her at her house, but Blake still didn't know what was going on. With no other choice, they went into the house together to investigate, but they still couldn't find anything useful. Seeing this, Everett revealed his injured shoulder to Blake, but as soon as he took off his shirt, Everett realized he now had an 8-pack of abs. This was strange because he had never had abs before. However, Blake wasn't surprised at all, as she had experienced a drastic improvement in her skin after her injury. While they were discussing their respective changes, a werewolf suddenly appeared outside the house. The werewolf attacked them without hesitation. Everett and Blake tried desperately to escape, but the werewolf didn't give them any chance. With the way out blocked and their lives hanging by a thread, Everett's anxiety flared up again. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a masked man was stumbling through the fire. Facing the surrounding flames, the man realized his chances of escaping were slim, so he took out a pre-recorded voice recorder and left a message for his children, Luna and Harlan. He spoke about Luna's uniqueness and mentioned that they would be able to find others like them. After saying all this, Garrett still wanted to make one last attempt to escape. So, after putting away the voice recorder, he continued to flee along the stream. Everett and Blake are now safe. Blake felt she needed to check on her family's safety, so she said goodbye to Everett. Just as Blake left, Everett received a call from an unknown number. The caller introduced herself as Kristen, an investigator with the fire department. She called Everett because they had found some unusual evidence at the edge of the forest. They suspected the forest fire was an act of arson. They believed the arsonist might be a minor and even suspected that the arsonist was on the school bus with Everett.
The arsonist I'm looking for might have been sitting right next to you, watching the fire from the windows, watching people burn to death.
But just as Everett finished listening and put down the phone, he started to feel a headache coming on. At the same time, Blake experienced the same symptoms on her way home. Suddenly, they both stood still with their eyes turning white. These symptoms also appeared in Luna and her brother while they were searching for their father. As the symptoms subsided, they all began running in the same direction, as if they were being summoned. They eventually met in a clearing. Strangely, as soon as the four of them met, their eyes began to glow yellow.
Yeah, I see it.
Your eyes are glowing.
So are yours.
What never happens?
Because we're all here.
Despite the strangeness of it all, Luna and her brother were not surprised. However, they didn't show it. At that moment, Blake seemed to see something terrifying again and ran off first. Seeing this, Everett chased after her. Luna and her brother followed closely behind. However, they hadn't run far before Blake collided with a firefighter who was working on the rescue. Seeing miners in the fire zone, the firefighter immediately decided to take them home. Thus, they were all forced to return home. Back at the motel, Blake intended to check her injured waist, but when she lifted her shirt, she found that her injured waist no longer had any trace of the wound. Moreover, her facial skin had become increasingly flawless. Just as she was about to admire her skin, she suddenly saw a fanged figure in the mirror, but this was only the beginning. Thinking it was just a hallucination, Blake returned to her room and received a voicemail.
You're not safe.
Meanwhile, Luna and her brother were also sent back to their home. Since their father was the missing forest ranger, the firefighters explained the fire situation on a map and pointed out the area where their father might be. After the firefighters left, they began discussing Everett and Blake. Luna thought they might be like them. However, Harlan disagreed. He believed that Everett and Blake were just bitten and that their bodies were undergoing uncontrollable changes. He thought they might not be like them, and could even be enemies. Back at home, Everett wanted to go to bed, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't sleep. He's as alert as he was during the day. Blake experienced the same symptoms. When they finally woke up, an entire day had passed. While sleeping, they had subconsciously blocked their room doors. After waking up, Everett was informed that the police were at his house to question him about the forest fire. Among them was the investigator, Kristen, but Everett claimed he knew nothing, because Everett refused to mention anything about his classmates or what happened on the school bus. The police placed him under house arrest. At dusk, one of Everett's classmates named Connor came to his house to study. While they were talking, Connor mentioned that he seemed to have been bitten by either a coyote or a lion that day. Everett panicked instantly upon hearing this, thinking Connor might be turning into someone like him. He quickly asked Connor to show him the wound. However, it seemed Connor's wound was indeed just a coyote bite. Seeing that Connor's wound wasn't healing rapidly like his own, Everett felt relieved. But just to be safe, he told Connor to call him if anything unusual happened. Meanwhile, Blake, who had noticed her newfound speed comparable to Bolt's, decided to test how fast she really was. After some testing with Danny, they didn't notice anything unusual. As Blake lay on the ground resting, Kristen suddenly showed up. Connor was back in the hospital to have his cast changed due to a broken bone, but just as the doctor was giving him an injection, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his arm that spread all over his body.
It burns. It hurts. Alright, relax. Don't get me, Connor.
After Kristen left, Everett secretly sneaked out to find Blake, saying he sensed something was wrong. With the full moon approaching, Everett thought it might be a challenging time for them and came to discuss a plan with Blake. Luna also felt this sense of foreboding, but unlike the others, she noticed some movement outside her house. As Luna approached the door to get a better look, a white horse suddenly burst through the door. Connor, suspected of having a drug allergy, was given a sedative at the hospital, which restored him to normal, but the sedative didn't last long, and Connor woke up again. Upon waking, Connor received a call from an unknown number. The caller, much like the one who warned Everett, urged Connor to run, saying something would track him by scent and if he didn't run, he'd be dead. Panicked, Connor followed the caller's advice and prepared to sneak out of the hospital. At the same time, Everett and Blake concluded through their discussion that they might actually be turning into werewolves, just like in the myths. Just then, Everett received a call from Connor. Connor said he felt something was tracking him.
Wasn't a coyote.
I know.
It was line.
I know.
It's trying to find me. It's trying to kill me.
Hearing this, Everett immediately headed to the hospital with Blake. In the hospital, Connor saw the silhouette of a werewolf outside the door, but with his immobility, he was quickly spotted by the werewolf. At this moment, Luna and her brother also received a call from the hospital and arrived there. Firefighters had just found their father barely alive at the edge of the forest, so they called Luna and her brother to come and take care of him. Meanwhile, Everett and Blake had reached the hospital, but they were still too late because Connor was already in a dire situation. Connor tried to escape through a broken fence but got his cast caught in the wire mesh. Hearing the eerie sounds around him, Connor grabbed a nearby rock in desperation. He needed to smash the cast to have any chance of escaping. However, it was already too late. The police found Luna and her brother, and just like with Everett, they wanted to understand more about the forest fire. Everett, following the clues from Connor's call, reached the broken fence, but there was no sign of Connor, only the shattered pieces of his cast. Just then, Kristen appeared, bringing Blake with her. Blake was stunned by what he saw in front of him because Everett was being pinned against the wall by a werewolf. Seeing the gaping maw that could bite off his head, Everett panicked too, but in the next second, another classmate saved him. Just 2.5 days ago, Everett and Blake were just ordinary high school students, but an eerie forest fire turned them into werewolves. A detective named Kristen also noticed their transformation. Additionally, since the fire department now suspects that a group of minors set the forest fire, Everett, Blake, and the Luna siblings were all taken to the police station for investigation. Originally, the fire had nothing to do with them. Everett planned to bluff his way through, but an unexpected incident occurred during the interrogation. While Everett was being questioned by Kristen, their conversation was overheard by Harlan, who has sharp hearing. In the next room, Harlan originally just wanted to make a casual remark but didn't expect that Everett would hear his muttering. Harlan was very curious about this because Everett's hearing is no different from an ordinary person's, so how did he manage to hear his whispers? But just as Harlan raised this question, Blake and Luna in the other two rooms also said they heard his voice. However, their behavior now appeared to be talking to themselves in the eyes of outsiders. Because they weren't hearing words, they were sharing their brain consciousness. In other words, their voices directly appeared in each other's minds. All of this happened because they were gathered together. As long as wolves gather, all their senses can qualitatively leap. The 4 werewolves were no exception. For Everett, who already suffers from anxiety and lacks brainpower, Luna and the others decided to use this advantage to teach him how to cope with the interrogation, but just as they were about to finish Kristen's interrogation, Harlan was targeted by another police officer, Trent. Trent resented Harlan and the others because the forest fire incident prevented him from getting off work on time. Therefore, he ignored his superior's orders and privately interrogated Harlan, but just as Trent was about to pin a fabricated charge on Harlan, Harlan's father, Garrett, suddenly arrived. Garrett intended to take his children away. Since the police had no evidence to prove that Luna and the others were arsonists, they had no right to arrest them for questioning. As they were leaving, Luna quietly told Garrett about Everett and Blake's situation. Hearing this, Garrett realized the seriousness of the matter, so he took all 4 of them out of the police station. However, shortly after they left, another suspect in the arson case, Phoebe, had an accident. As Phoebe was about to get into her BMW to go home, she found that someone had slashed her tires, and the cuts looked like they were made by wolf claws. Phoebe thought it was a prank and was about to call her father to pick her up when all the other tires mysteriously deflated one after another. On the way home, Luna explained their recent experiences to Garrett, but Garrett was not surprised because he himself had been targeted by werewolves. They then returned to Garrett's home. Garrett said that werewolves were very dangerous and warned them not to leave his house. Then he took the Luna siblings to a room to talk. Because the Luna siblings weren't bitten and turned into werewolves, they were born werewolves, and the werewolf who wanted to hunt them might be their biological father.
We've never killed anything before.
You've never had it back before.
Garrett then said he needed to go out for 20 minutes and that during this time, no one should step outside the house. After saying this, Garrett left. No one knew where he went, but as soon as Garrett walked out the door, a police car arrived at his house while he was away. The 4 people inside followed Garrett's instructions and tightly closed the doors and windows. After doing this, they started discussing their special abilities. Harlan had extremely sharp hearing, Luna had an exceptionally keen sense of smell, Everett possessed tremendous destructive strength, and Blake had speed faster than Usain Bolt. Moreover, their abilities would synchronize when all 4 of them were together, which was their pack effect. But just as they discovered this, there was a knock on the door. However, Garrett had only been gone for about 10 minutes, and it was the middle of the night. Who could be knocking on the door now? But as Luna and the others didn't respond, the person outside identified himself as Trent from the police department, saying he wanted to talk to Harlan again. Trent said he felt he had been a bit rash with Harlan at the police station. Hearing that Trent had no ill intentions, Harlan relaxed and walked out of the house, but as soon as he stepped outside, Trent pinned him against the wall. It was clear that Garrett had irritated Trent at the police station, so Trent took the opportunity to vent his frustration on Harlan while Garrett was away. However, Trent had no idea how ignorant his actions were. Harlan quickly ran back inside to inform them that the werewolves had appeared again. Luna immediately called Garrett after hearing this. Upon hearing about the werewolves, Garrett turned his car around and headed home. Garrett also told Harlan there was a gun in the stable and that he needed to get it for protection. Following their father's instructions, Harlan and Luna quickly ran to the stable. Meanwhile, Everett and Blake, unaware of the Luna siblings' whereabouts, were about to go outside to see what was happening, but then, unexpectedly, they received that mysterious call again. The caller warned them not to go outside because the moon was about to reach its peak, and they would be safe if they could endure that moment. But clearly, Everett was disobedient. After the mysterious person hung up, he and Blake stepped outside. As soon as they were outside, they froze, because the werewolves were already there. After the werewolf leaves, Everett is puzzled as to why it didn't kill him. Luna says that maybe they're not prey for the werewolf anymore.
I guess we're connected.
Soon after, Garrett returned home, but at this moment, Harlan directly confronted him with the bullets, demanding to know the reason. Why had he prepared silver bullets? Didn't he know those could kill werewolves? Then Garrett explained everything to them. It turned out that 16 years ago, when Garrett was an ordinary forest ranger, he was doing his usual patrol up the mountain one day when he unexpectedly found 2 abandoned wolf pups in a den. Seeing the weak little creatures, Garrett decided to save them, but as soon as he brought the 2 wolf pups home, their paws transformed into baby hands right in front of him. Although surprised, Garrett didn't tell anyone about this. He raised the 2 werewolves under the guise of adopting abandoned babies. They are Luna and Harlan. As for the silver bullets, It was because of Luna when she was young. One full moon night, Luna didn't sleep and ran to the stable, seemingly summoned there, but when the horses in the stable saw Luna, they went berserk and tried to kill her. In a life-threatening moment, Luna transformed. After learning about this, Garrett was terrified, so he made silver bullets just in case, based on mythical stories. However, Garrett had never used these bullets, so he didn't know if they could actually kill werewolves. On the other side, at the police station, Austin was brought in for questioning. Austin didn't hide anything. He said that when he got out of the car to pick up his phone that day, he saw something eerie in the black mist. It was large, with deep black fur, about 7 feet tall, with fangs and claws. It turns out that Kristen was also suspecting a monster, as these were exactly the description she had drawn from other students' mouths. However, Austin didn't intend to say much more and angrily left the police station. Kristen didn't try to stop Austin because she had already gotten what she wanted. Then Kristen arrived at the fence where Connor went missing. Looking at the bandages on the wire, Kristen lay on the ground, trying to find clues by mimicking Connor's position, but just as she lay down, she suddenly heard a noise. When she got up, she found that the fire-covered ram had come here, and it had huge claw marks on its body. Meanwhile, Garrett sent Everett and Blake back home. Before they left, Luna knew Blake didn't have a phone, so she wrote her number on Blake's arm with a semi-permanent pen. On the way home, Garrett told them to continue going to school as usual. For now, they should pretend nothing had happened and leave everything to him. But as soon as Everett got back to school, Austin found him. Austin said he was seriously affected by the incident and hoped to get Everett's help. However, Everett had promised Garrett not to say anything, so he brushed off Austin with a vague excuse. Then it was time for their exam. Just as they were writing, something unexpected happened. It seemed Everett's anxiety kicked in again, his hand trembling uncontrollably as he held his pen. This symptom appeared in Blake as well.
What's wrong with you?
I'm just having a little anxiety.
Before they could say anything, the Luna siblings came over. It was clear they were affected too. This was all because the four of them had gathered together, triggering the pack effect again. As a result, everyone became very irritable. Then Harlan and Everett clashed. This showed that whenever they gathered, this would happen. In the wild, when wolves gather, the next thing is to hunt and kill. These werewolves were no exception. Because of this, Blake believed they shouldn't stay together, as she didn't want to kill anyone, so she chose to leave. Everett felt the same way. Meanwhile, at the police station, Garrett approached Kristen because he wanted to form an alliance. He intended to use the police to help him kill the werewolves. Seeing the value in Garrett's information, Kristen took him to the morgue to see the dead ram. Seeing the ram's wounds, Garrett immediately said it was the work of werewolves, but Kristen was still a bit skeptical. Seeing this,
You're trying to find another incendiary device.
Garrett continued to explain. On the other side, when Blake got home, her father, who had to go out for work, bought her a phone to keep in touch. He also told Blake that during her absence, a mysterious man had been calling to ask about her, but Danny had taken all the calls. Blake hurriedly went to ask Danny what the mysterious man had said. Danny didn't say a word but wrote something on the drawing board. When Blake took it, it said, "Without them, you won't survive." At that moment, the phone Roberto had bought her rang again. Blake didn't plan to answer it. She took Danny and left the motel. Blake then took Danny to her part-time job. Everett thought this would help her avoid everything. However, just as she was about to finish her shift, a strange black car pulled up. The person in the car didn't make any moves. He blocked the entrance for a long time before taking out money to pay the fee. Seeing this eerie black car, Blake feared he was there to steal something from the garage. After reassuring Danny, she prepared to follow the car to see what was happening, but after wandering around, she couldn't find any trace of the black car. Frustrated, Blake decided to check the surveillance footage, but the surveillance room was empty, and the monitors had switched directly to her post. And that's when Danny, who was at the post, seemed to hear something. Curious, Danny looked outside and saw the werewolf approaching. Terrified, he quickly hid under a chair. Seeing that Danny had disappeared from the guardhouse, Everett immediately sensed that something was wrong. Unbeknownst to her, the footage from the surveillance cameras had been synced to the TV at Everett's house, and when Everett turned his head, he discovered that the guardhouse had somehow appeared inside his house. Blake frantically searched every corner of the parking lot for Danny, but no matter how much she searched and called out for Danny, there was no trace of him. Even when she reached the rooftop, she found nothing. Desperate, Blake ran to the fence and called out Danny's name. Blake hurried back to the booth to call the police. Just as she finished the call and looked up, she was astonished to see Everett holding Danny in the parking lot. Blake quickly ran over to check on Danny, but when she walked over to Danny, she saw that he was holding a tuft of gray fur in his hand. Blake urgently asked Everett what had happened, but Everett said he didn't know anything. He had just heard Blake's cries while he was at home, and then somehow he was holding Danny and appeared here. As they were puzzling over this, they saw the Luna siblings running over. Blake quickly asked if they had come because they heard her calling out, but Luna replied. At that moment,
Because you didn't scream. You howled.
on the other side of the city, on a rotten building, a man's body was being dragged upwards by something. The man was then taken inside the building and thrown somewhere. A werewolf crouches on the roof, watching the couple below on their date, but to his surprise, the couple starts kissing right in front of him. Seeing this, the werewolf became enraged. That's right, just yesterday, Luna and the others gathered again because of Blake's howling, but it's also because the werewolf took Danny this time that Everett finally understands why the werewolf doesn't harm them, because now, they have all become werewolves. Although they aren't as fierce and bloodthirsty as that werewolf, they are now part of the wolf pack, so the werewolf is actually protecting them. The werewolf took Danny because Danny, who has autism, hit Blake, and the same goes for Trent, who pinned Harlan against the wall earlier. The werewolf considers them his kin, so everything that happened before was to protect them. However, as they were discussing this, Everett received another mysterious unknown call, but now that they know the werewolf's secret, Everett decides not to answer yet. As time passes, both Harlan and Luna receive the same mysterious call. Reluctantly, realizing they can't avoid it, Everett finally presses the answer button.
He took to flight, and on the silent plains is howling in his vain attempts to speak. He raves and rages at his greedy jaws, desiring their accustomed slaughter, turn against the sheep, still eager for their blood.
The bizarre call leaves everyone bewildered. Fortunately, Luna, who is well-read, says it's the story of Lycaon written by a Roman poet. In this story, Lycaon is a king, but he makes offerings of human flesh to Zeus. In his wrath, Zeus destroys Lycaon's kingdom and turns Lycaon into a werewolf, making him the first werewolf in the world. The mysterious caller then says that it kills people every night, and these killings are because of the four of them. Furthermore, because the werewolf's nature is to kill, it will hunt, then kill, then hide. This cycle will continue endlessly until it can be controlled, and now the only way is for the four of them to unite to stop it. After saying this, the mysterious person sends them a phone location. They immediately drive to the location sent by the mysterious caller, because this is where the werewolf will strike next. They arrived at the location and saw an overturned vehicle. Upon closer inspection, they found the doctor who had previously treated Everett lying inside the car. Seeing this, they hurriedly prepared to remove the car door to rescue the doctor. However, even after they managed to remove the door, it was too late. It's clear that given their limited experience, the four of them would find it extremely difficult to stop the werewolf's hunt. Now, the only option might be tomorrow night, because tomorrow night is a full moon. They might gain powerful strength through the moon. Afterward, they returned to school and resumed their classes as usual, but to their surprise, as soon as they got back, they saw the police and Luna's father, Garrett, investigating the forest arson case. Additionally, the police had their eyes on a student named Cyrus, because he was the first to know the best spot to view the wildfire. At this point, Everett and the others gathered in the restroom to have a secret discussion, because they had received another address from the mysterious caller, and this one was the home of another classmate named Tia. Coincidentally, Tia had invited other classmates to her house for a party tonight, giving them a perfect excuse to blend in early. Meanwhile, Cyrus was being questioned by the investigator, Kristen, because Cyrus's father was also a firefighter who had died in a forest fire 16 years ago. Kristen suspected there might be some connection between the two fires. Everett and the others, wanting to stand out at the party, went to the gym to work out. It was during this workout that Everett suddenly had a thought. That is, Harlan and Luna, since they had transformed from wolves to humans, according to the laws of conservation of energy and Newton's third law, could it be possible for them to transform back into wolves through some means? Or perhaps these laws could also apply to that werewolf? But the most important thing at the moment was to attend the party and prevent the werewolf from causing havoc. So, with the hallucinogenic mushrooms that Harlan brought, they successfully got into Tia's house. Meanwhile, the police, after releasing Cyrus, went to the best spot to view the fire based on the address Cyrus provided. Sure enough, from there, they had a perfect view of the entire forest fire. Using drone footage and Garrett's seasoned forestry experience, they discovered that this spot was where the arsonist had set the fire. The arsonist had used a drone to deliver an incendiary device to the mountains, igniting the wildfire, and then watched the whole spectacle from this vantage point, as if he had some other purpose. However, midway through the party, an unexpected event occurred. First, while Harlan was taking a break, he and Cyrus developed a mutual liking for each other, so they wanted to exchange phone numbers, but as soon as Harlan dialed Cyrus's number, his phone displayed it as an unknown number. Then there was Austin, another student at the party, who tried to use his phone to capture the fun moments. Predictably, Blake tossed Austin's phone into the pool. Angry, Austin jumped into the pool to retrieve his phone, but just as he reached the bottom and grabbed his phone, he saw a werewolf in the water ahead. Terrified, Austin frantically swam to the surface, while others were puzzled. The werewolf emerged from the water. Meanwhile, the police, searching for more clues, split up to investigate the building. During their search, Kristen and another officer found a large number of bodies in an elevator shaft. The officer was curious about who could be so ruthless. Kristen said it was completely normal because it was the work of a werewolf. At this moment, the students who had been hiding in the mansion for a long time sensed that the werewolf had left the swimming pool. As they were about to check if the werewolf had left, they saw that it was still lurking outside. Reluctantly, they retreated back inside the house. Unbeknownst to them, the werewolf had already transformed back into a human and was mingling among them. While hiding, Everett noticed a classmate who seemed even more frightened than he was. Everett wanted to comfort him, but the classmate said he seemed to have forgotten his own name and grew increasingly terrified as he spoke. Everett thought the classmate had taken too many hallucinogenic mushrooms, and as he approached to teach him how to breathe, Blake suddenly turned off the lights, interrupting him. When Everett turned back again, the classmate had vanished without a trace. Everett asked others if they had seen him, but everyone said they hadn't. They thought he might have wandered off after drinking too much or that the werewolf sighting was a collective hallucination caused by the mushrooms. So, Cyrus volunteered to go out and find him. Seeing his good friend about to take a risk, Harlan immediately decided to go with him, but just as they left, Kristen arrived with the police. They're here to find Cyrus. It was clear they had come because of the fire viewing spot in the building, but with Harlan and Cyrus already gone, Everett told Garrett about the werewolf's appearance. Meanwhile, Harlan and Cyrus had reached the back hill. Upon arrival, Harlan sensed something was wrong and wanted to leave, but Cyrus didn't want to miss this chance to spend time together. Just as they were about to find a place to rest, Harlan suddenly saw a werewolf appear behind Cyrus. At the same time, Kristen appeared behind them.
Harlan, run.
Hearing gunshots, Garrett and the others immediately headed to the back hill. Kristen started negotiating with the werewolf, believing it couldn't control its wolf nature, and Kristen says she has ways to help it control it. So as long as it's willing, Kristen offered to be a guide to help it manage. As Kristen continued to persuade, the werewolf responded.
Help me.
But just then, other officers arrived, and Garrett had already come face to face with the werewolf. After failing to capture the werewolf, they returned to the mansion. However, when Sheriff Jason asked them what they had seen, both Kristen and Garrett claimed they saw a large black bear. So, they left the scene. Meanwhile, Garrett told Luna and the others to go home. But now, Harlan and Cyrus were nowhere to be found. When Everett returned home, his father, David, was waiting for him. David said that Everett hadn't taken his anxiety medication for several days, and he was there tonight to ensure he took it. In a creepy tone, David forced Everett to take the medication. Everett, having no choice, pretended to swallow the pills and then went to the bathroom to spit them out. Meanwhile, at Tia's house, since everyone else had left, Tia was enjoying a swim alone. As Tia rested by the pool's edge, she thought she heard a noise. Curious, Tia turned to see what it was, but saw nothing. Just as Tia was about to continue relaxing, the werewolf appeared. At the same time, Austin, who had taken too many mushrooms, was lying inside the house resting. As he woke up, he saw someone on the glass roof. This person is Tia, who was just swimming. The next morning, Everett went to Luna's house. They had found Harlan and Cyrus. It turned out that the night before, Harlan and Cyrus had returned to the stable at Harlan's house to escape the noisy crowd. During their time alone, Harlan discovered that Cyrus was not the mysterious caller, because Cyrus had simply set his phone number to hidden. Cyrus did this because he too had received a call from an unknown number. The caller mentioned Cyrus's late father. The person wanted to know what had happened to his father 16 years ago. Since his father, a firefighter, had died in the line of duty, Cyrus didn't want others to speculate about his father. To avoid being disturbed, Cyrus had set his phone number to appear as an unknown caller. Harlan, with his keen hearing, could tell from Cyrus's heartbeat that he wasn't lying. So, Harlan called Everett and the others over to hear Cyrus talk about his father. Cyrus said his father died in the forest fire and his body was never found. In fact, the bodies of the entire team of fallen firefighters were never recovered. Only one person survived that fire. The survivor's name was Malcolm, who now works as a janitor at the hospital. If they wanted to know more, they might be able to ask him. The four of them then went to the hospital to find Malcolm. However, Malcolm didn't pay much attention to the kids looking for him, constantly brushing them off with various excuses. That was until Luna directly mentioned the werewolf. Malcolm led them to a storage room and then told them what happened back then. 16 years ago, a forest fire suddenly broke out, and their firefighting team was dispatched to contain it. But the fire spread quickly, trapping Malcolm and 5 other firefighters. They tried to control the fire, but it was futile. The only escape route left was the railroad, but a gray wolf blocked the way. It was an enormous gray wolf, seemingly intent on keeping the firefighters away. Seeing that their lives were at stake, the 6 firefighters didn't hesitate and started shooting at the wolf. To their shock, even after exhausting all their bullets and hitting the wolf dozens of times, it wouldn't die. Every time the wolf fell, it quickly got back up, until Cyrus's father shot the gray wolf in the eyebrow. The gray wolf fell down and didn't stand up, but the wolf was still breathing, so they decided to throw it into the fire to burn it. To their horror, the fire mutated the gray wolf, making its eyes glow, claws grow, muscles bulge, and it stood up on 2 legs, looking human. Only Malcolm managed to escape. After hearing this, Everett quickly said that the werewolf was likely protecting its kind. Perhaps there were other wolves it wanted to protect, like wolf pups, but Malcolm said that at the time, they didn't find anything else besides the werewolf. Reluctantly, Everett and the others returned home. Given the current situation, it seemed that the werewolf who attacked the firefighting team back then was likely Harlan and Luna's biological mother. It was trying to protect Harlan and Luna. It was also due to the forest fire that Luna and her brother were transferred to the forest under Garrett's care. Then, when the mother wolf left to return to the burning forest, Garrett appeared and took Harlan and Luna back home. He then raised them for 16 years. They began to suspect that the mysterious caller might be the mastermind behind everything. His goal might be to lure up the werewolf and then have Everett and Blake bitten, but the question remained, what was his ultimate aim? Just then, they noticed the lights in the stable were on. They hurried over to see what was happening. When they arrived, they saw Garrett. It turned out that while they were at the hospital, Garrett had found Cyrus hiding there. Since Cyrus was the prime suspect in the forest arson case, Garrett was persuading him to turn himself in. Seeing his good friend being taken away, Harlan instantly became furious and punched his father in the face. As Garrett, bewildered, looked up, he saw that Harlan and the others now had glowing eyes and had grown fangs.
Harlan Briggs, look at me. Harlan. Remember. Harlan.
Clearly, they didn't even know how they had transformed. Luna asks Garrett how he did it. Garrett said it was an ancient legend. The legend said that if you call out a werewolf's name with sincerity, they will remember who they are and calm down, transforming back into human form. He hadn't expected it to actually work. Garrett then said that the werewolf who had been killing for them might be their brother, because yesterday, while he was shooting at the werewolf, it transformed into a human right before his eyes, and it looked just like them, around 16 or 17 years old. Hearing Garrett's description of the werewolf, Everett chimed in, saying that it was the same person he saw at the party.
Is Baron.
But he's part of the pack.
Her brother.
Baron.
Just now, after learning that he was the only one who could see the werewolf Baron, Everett chose to go home and sleep, but in the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up from his sleep, and he noticed that the hair on his body was standing on end. As Everett was feeling curious, he was startled to see the werewolf Baron appear in his house. Everett quickly tried to comfort and wake up Baron, but Baron didn't seem to appreciate it. When Baron ran off, Everett wanted to go to the bathroom to wipe his sweat. At that moment, Everett saw a figure in the mirror with its back to him, and the figure moved with his actions. Everett also noticed movement behind him, and when he turned around, he saw Baron again. Seeing everything calm down again, Everett curiously went forward to check the situation. When he got downstairs, he discovered that the front door of his house had mysteriously opened on its own. Then Baron suddenly charged at him from outside like a madman. Everett was so scared that he hid behind the cabinet. At this point, Baron transformed back into a normal person, muttering something about not being able to stop it. Seeing this, Everett quickly asked Baron what he needed to stop, but Baron didn't answer. Since Baron hadn't turned into a werewolf, Everett bravely stepped out. Baron was curled up, sitting on the stairs. Everett mustered the courage to approach him. Baron said that he wasn't the one who killed those people, it was the it inside him. He had never been able to control it, so it turned around and controlled him, using his body to go against his will and hurt humans. As Baron spoke, water suddenly started flowing down the stairs. Then Everett saw Tia, who had been killed by the werewolf, appear. She said that Baron would kill everyone. That included Everett and Blake, because Baron could establish a new pack anytime, anywhere. Then Tia vanished as she spoke. Suddenly, it was daytime, and Baron was already gone. On the other side, Roberto and Danny were preparing to check out of their motel after staying there for too long, so Roberto asked Danny to go get their things, but when Danny got to the door, he was shocked to find that the door had been forced open. Thinking his sister had returned, Danny bravely decided to go inside and take a look. However, as Danny went deeper into the room, he saw a large amount of blood on the floor. Soon after, he found a body in the bathtub. The police arrived and took control of the scene, discovering that the body in the bathtub was the missing Tia. Blake was completely unaware of these events. As she and the Luna siblings were at Everett's house, Everett was recounting everything he had seen the previous night. He said it all seemed so surreal, yet so real, as if it existed only in his mind. Harlan suggested that it might be the pack effect among them, but why was this effect only happening to Everett? This baffled everyone. Everett said maybe they could lure Baron to a certain place. They had tried using pure silver bullets, which really worked on werewolves. Plus, he had discussed the law of mutual interaction with Harlan at the gym before, so Everett thought that if Baron could transform into a wolf, then he could also turn into a human like them.
So you want to hunt down and catch a werewolf?
Yeah. Let's catch a werewolf.
Everett then planned to take Blake home first, but to their surprise, when they got back, they found the place surrounded by police. Seeing this, Blake panicked and ran over to ask what had happened. Seeing a body at the place where she lived made Blake even more anxious. Fortunately, Blake had an alibi, so she wasn't arrested by the police. However, as Blake and Danny were watching everything unfold, Danny suddenly said he had seen Kristen in the garage, but Blake thought Danny's autism was acting up again, as they had indeed seen Kristen in the parking lot. Not the parking garage, but Danny kept insisting that it was indeed the garage. Blake, feeling helpless, decided not to continue the conversation. At this point, Kristen noticed and came over to talk to them. Meanwhile, Everett and the others figured out how to turn Baron back into a human. Everett said he found in ancient books that Baron's body might contain both a wolf and a human simultaneously. unlike the perfect fusion scene in the Harlan siblings. So what they needed to do was kill the wolf inside Baron and then revive Baron through medical means. That way, Baron could become a human again, but controlling Baron after he transformed was extremely difficult. The only way was to trap Baron in an environment of -70°C to freeze the wolf inside him. Then they could revive Baron with adrenaline. Trapping Baron in a freezer wasn't easy, so they needed Luna's help, because Austin had fallen for her at the last dance, and Austin was Baron's next target. They decided to use this to their advantage and trick Baron into the freezer. For the sake of her kind, Luna agreed. Then they went to discuss the plan with Austin. Under the temptation of beauty and knowing he couldn't handle a werewolf alone, Austin agreed. They coated a knife with pure silver and gave it to Austin just in case. As evening quickly arrived, Luna and Austin reached the designated location. After waiting for some time, Baron finally appeared, but because Luna was by Austin's side, Baron hesitated to attack Austin. Luna realized it was because of her presence, so she told Austin to hit her to provoke Baron's protective instinct. That way, Baron would attack. But Austin says a good man never hits a woman, so he won't do it. Seeing this, Luna started hitting Austin herself. As Luna slapped Austin, he suddenly kissed her. Witnessing this, Baron's rage was instantly triggered. Baron couldn't open the door, so he looked for another way in. When Baron looked down, he saw Austin running away, so he chased after him without hesitation. But Baron didn't know that the person under the clothes was now Blake. With her speed surpassing even Bolt's, Blake was the perfect choice to lure Baron into the freezer. After a long chase, Blake finally led Baron into the freezer. Now came the crucial part: how to get out. None of them were a match for Baron, so Everett tried calling out Baron's name to wake him up. This method worked. After Everett's repeated calls, Baron finally let go of him. They took this opportunity to escape from the freezer. After being locked in the freezer for a while, Baron calmed down, listening to Baron's heartbeat gradually slow and stop. Harlan knew the werewolf inside Baron might be dead, so they opened the door and went in to rescue him. Inside the freezer, Baron does turn into a human, but to their surprise, as they were rescuing him, Austin seized the moment and plunged the silver-coated knife into Baron's heart. After intense pain, Baron found himself on a hospital couch. A doctor came to see him, but strangely, the doctor called him Everett. When the doctor summoned Everett's parents, they turned out to be Kristen and Garrett. To alleviate Baron's pain, the doctor prepared to inject him with a sedative. But when Baron looked at the syringe, he saw that the doctor was about to inject him with mercury. After another bout of pain, Baron found himself in a car with Danny sitting next to him. Garrett and Kristen were fighting over a phone, and their struggle led to a car accident. Following another wave of pain, Baron found himself in Garrett's house. He overheard Garrett arguing with another ranger about Luna killing a white horse when she was young. Then Baron saw Luna as a child. Curious, Baron reached out to hold Luna's hand, but as soon as he touched her, he was transported to another place. This place was a jungle, with Cyrus sitting nearby. Cyrus called him Harlan and told him to kill him.
Run.
As he ran, Baron saw his shadow transform into a wolf, and then he saw a young Harlan. At this moment, Garrett appeared in front of him with a gun and shot him without hesitation. Baron finally realized that he had been stabbed in the chest. Everything he had just experienced was at the edge of life and death, where Baron and Harlan shared information through the pack effect. The events he went through were the past experiences of Harlan and the others. Now, Harlan and the others were still trying to save Baron. Just then, Everett's phone suddenly rang. It was the mysterious caller. He said they must remove the pure silver from Baron's body, or he would slowly die. When Baron's life reaches zero, Everett and Blake's superpowers would also disappear, and they might even die.
Let him die.
But the others didn't follow Blake's instructions. They did their best to remove what silver residue they could. However, this only delayed Baron's death. To save Baron, they needed to seek help. Harlan and Luna decisively left the scene and went to the police station to find Garrett for help. As soon as they arrived, they heard the sheriff say they had discovered a place where werewolves had been stacking human corpses. Garrett panicked upon hearing this because he feared the police would discover his children were werewolves. He didn't hesitate and told the Luna siblings to go home. Meanwhile, Blake, taking care of Danny, brought him to Everett's house. When Danny saw Baron, he was too scared to approach because he knew Baron was the werewolf who had captured him in the parking garage. Everett doubted this, saying that if it was the transformed Baron who captured him, how did Danny recognize that the werewolf was Baron? At this moment, Blake suddenly remembered Danny saying he had seen Kristen in the garage too. Blake quickly went to Danny to confirm this. Danny confirmed it, saying Kristen had even shaken his hand. Upon hearing this, Everett also recalled that Kristen had appeared and shaken his hand shortly after he had been bitten by a werewolf. Blake remembered that when she and Danny were about to test how fast she was, Kristen had appeared and shaken her hand as well. This all pointed to the fact that the werewolves stopped chasing them because Kristen had marked them through a handshake. Upon recognizing this mark, the werewolves ceased their pursuit. Danny had been saved by Kristen in the parking garage. After marking Danny, Kristen had handed him over to Everett, creating the illusion that Everett had saved Danny. At this moment, Luna and Garrett arrived at Everett's house. Garrett immediately asked where Baron was. Without hesitation, Garrett lifted Baron and rushed to the hospital. But little did they know, the hospital would be yet another major turning point for them. After they left, Kristen brought Roberto here. They had come to take Danny away. Roberto said they could give Danny a better life. After Roberto took Danny away, Kristen approached Everett and said she would protect them as if they were her own children. Meanwhile, after bringing Baron to the hospital, Everett unexpectedly encountered his father there. David immediately accused Everett of being insane, claiming he had stopped taking his medication and no longer feared his mother, so he believed Everett had lost his mind. David brought a doctor from the psychiatric hospital to take Everett away. After Everett was taken away, Baron appeared in a wheelchair, pushed by none other than firefighter Malcolm. Malcolm said Baron's mother was the arsonist responsible for the forest fire because she needed to force Baron out of the forest. Malcolm also revealed that his mother was the same she-wolf he had encountered in the forest 16 years ago. Garrett discovered that Baron was missing from his hospital bed. Kristen arrived at the scene. They found a firefighter's helmet on the bed. Seeing this, Kristen's expression turned serious. She immediately asked Garrett if he trusted her. Upon receiving Garrett's affirmative answer, Kristen led Garrett away. Meanwhile, Harlan faced trouble in the hospital. Jason and his men found him. Jason said they now suspected Harlan of being Trent's killer, and he was arrested. At this point, Kristen, armed with a gun and alone, arrives at an abandoned fire station and finds Malcolm.
I brought you here so I could kill you.
Malcolm was clearly out for revenge and directly stated that his gun was loaded with pure silver bullets. A gunfight erupted instantly. However, Malcolm, being older, was no match for Kristen, and she shot him in the thigh. Garrett arrived to help Kristen. Garrett also saw Baron hidden on the car roof. Seeing himself at a disadvantage, Malcolm chose to retreat for the time being. Thus, they started a game of hide and seek at the fire station. At that moment, Kristen received a call from the mysterious person. The mysterious caller said he knew everything Kristen was trying to do. He had always been helping Everett and the others and would continue to do so. After saying this, the mysterious caller hung up. With no other choice, Kristen had to continue dealing with Malcolm, and as she turned around, she happened to run into Garrett, who was supporting Baron, but Garrett hadn't put down his gun. Seeing this, Kristen decided to come clean, revealing that she was the mother of the Luna siblings and that Baron was their brother. Kristen explained that Luna and Harlan each had unique abilities. Baron's ability was called transformation. Kristen then placed her hand directly on Baron's wound. When she removed her hand, Baron's wound had healed completely, without even a scar. At that moment, Malcolm attacked again. Kristen and Malcolm resumed their fight, but as a human, Malcolm was no match for Kristen. Within 2 moves, Kristen had him by the throat. Garrett then fired another shot at Malcolm. Even when facing Kristen, Garrett still didn't lower his gun. He believed that the presence of werewolves disrupted the ecological balance and posed a threat to humans. But Kristen showed no fear of the silver bullets in Garrett's gun. She used the Luna siblings to persuade Garrett. Kristen knew everything Garrett did was to protect the Luna siblings. Kristen promised she would not harm them and would always protect them because they were her children too. She told Garrett he could always be the father to the Luna siblings if he wished. Hearing this, Garrett softened. Moreover, Harlan was still in police custody, and he needed Kristen's help. So Garrett lowered his guard.
And have the father that he has always wanted in you.
Not the human father.
No. The wolf.